All right. Well, welcome back to Informed Decisions. Today is like a special episode today because we have the infamous Zack Cherry.
The infamous.
Zack Cherry is not infamous. Zack Cherry is wonderful. Zack Cherry is a horror movie YouTuber and Patreon creator whose account we have been following for over a few years. And that's actually how Garrison and I met, was that we both followed him. And we're both big fans of his work. And we really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this for us today. So thank you so much and welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you for all the kind words. And I don't mind infamous.
No, I know you don't.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool sweater there too.
I know. Well, I was going to mention this at the end, but yes, Zack's a movie maker, and this is
nice.
an upcoming movie called Macabre, and we're excited to see it when it does come out. So that kind of goes into our topic today. Our topic today is fan service in movies. And Zack makes movies, so we're going to pick his brain on how he feels like fan service can be good and how it can maybe hold a project back. And fan service, for people who don't know, it refers to the elements in media like video games and movies that are included to primary or please to attract fans, often with the goal of increasing appeal or viewership. Fan service can be fun and enhance a fan's experience, but it also sometimes can be distracting from the story overall's quality of the media, depending on how it's implemented. And so we're going to talk about today, so what kind of fan service kind of works for movies and what kind of fan service kind of holds sometimes franchises back from being its full potential.
All right.
Okay.
Nice. And I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I was excited all day thinking about this. And I did look up what the internet thinks are good examples of fan service. A good example that the internet came together to say is Avengers Endgame. That it's known for their fan service flashy, having moments like Thor's hammer being used by Captain America in that movie to kind of give fans some fan service-y things and how it can be fun and flashy. They also talked about Star Wars, the sequel trilogy, that it's filled with a lot of fan service that people like. And also, one of the ones that brings us all together is Scream 2022, that it's packed full of self-awareness and Easter eggs for fans, and it uses a lot of meta and slasher tropes to make nods to the characters and iconic moments. Kind of like the opening of Scream 2022 is a callback to the original Scream. Do y'all have any examples or any favorites or non-favorites so far?
I was actually just trying to think, like, where did it really start? Like, what was the first, like, big fan servicey movie or show that came out?
That's a good question, and I don't know where it exactly started. I do know that following various directors' careers after a while, you can kind of tell when certain filmmakers who are quote unquote fan servicey filmmakers, in the sense that they're clearly inspired by earlier works, which is true of a lot of filmmakers, but especially when it comes to genre filmmaking, it's more evident. I mean, I think John Carpenter is a clear example of somebody like that. I think Quentin Tarantino is probably the ultimate fanboy director, and I don't even think he would consider that an insult. So, because he culls and gathers, like, his brain is just like a mishmash of just movie references. So he's kind of like the ultimate. His movies are like the ultimate example of movies clearly made by somebody who like lives their life through watching movies, and that's fine. But so anything like from Assault on Precinct 13 to Kill Bill, these are, their own creations, but they are clearly made as kind of like almost like a collage or a montage of previous works. But I think what we're going into now really is something that's even deeper than that, and that is the concept that making movies and well, I mean, they're calling them requels now, but just, I guess, extending existing franchises by calling back to their earlier works and incorporating that into the new films, which kind of blurs the line between like, is okay, how much, where does fan service, the idea of fan service meaning uh, throwing callbacks to movies in the past from that we loved growing up, specifically within that franchise, as a way of like a nostalgia hit, to kind of make you want to bond with the new version. How far is too far when it comes to that, and when does it when does it like cross the line from being like fun and innocent to the point where it takes over and just calls attention to the fact its own lack of originality or transparent cash grabness.
Okay, yeah, a lot to address there. I mean, my typical takeaway with fan service, especially what we see now, is that it is all very derivative. You mentioned Quentin Tarantino, and I think that the differentiation there is that his, I guess, what would be called fan service, because I don't think that he would call it fan service, but that's more homage. And when it comes to like things that like Quentin Tarantino does, like it's not necessarily nostalgia, because these are things that most mainstream audiences are not familiar with. So it's more just like kind of tapping into the essence of like the movies that he likes and just sort of finding a way to translate that to his audience. And the way that I kind of like view fan service is that there's two different factions of that, and there's the kind that works and the kind that doesn't. And I think that fan service ultimately doesn't work because fan service is not fan satisfaction, which is what the other side of that spectrum would be. And you can look at a movie you mentioned, Scream 2022, which, I mean, I guess like Halloween 2018 would have been the first. Well, I mean, technically Halloween H2O, if we're going far back, because like when I asked the question, where did it start? That was the movie that sprung to my mind first, because a lot of what we see in Halloween H2O was kind of like callbacks to, like all throughout the franchise, but especially that first movie. And Halloween 2018 kind of did the same thing, where they were just kind of like hitting the same beats over and over again. And I have my own personal preference when it comes to like franchises such as that. And I much prefer H2O over 2018. And I think that okay, you're both nodding, so we're in agreement here. I think the thing that works for H2O for me, and why that I can look at as more of like fan satisfaction, because there's an underlying narrative throughout the whole thing where everything that's happening is in context of serving the character of like Laurie Strode. So everything that Jamie Lee Curtis is doing in that movie feels, even though they're hitting these specific beats where we've seen in the franchise before, it serves a purpose. It's pushing a larger story and her character all the way through. Whereas in 2018, there wasn't as much of a focus on her character, just in terms of like how she related to the entire story. So whenever there would be little callbacks to the original, it just felt like, okay, this is like a greatest hits sort of situation, and we're doing that. And bringing it back around to Scream 2022, it felt like with that opening scene specifically, it's like, okay, we're just going to kind of recreate the Drew Barrymore scene, but we're going to do it with like a new character, and it's going to, of course, take place 25 years later. So we're going to have, more modern technology, and we're doing this on a cell phone, even though like they did kind of have that in Scream 4 a little bit, but we've got that. We've also got the smartphone technology of like the home security and stuff like that. So it feels like it's just retreading the same thing, but it's just like, how do we make it more modern? And in that sense, it still feels like the same thing. It's just been infused with more of an updated quality, I guess, to just like draw in audiences that are more familiar with like current times.
I agree with all of that. I talked about this with Sam earlier that I do miss when sequels or franchises just did crazy stuff. Like, as you look at the Halloween, I didn't really enjoy any of the new trilogy except for Halloween Ends, which did kind of go in a crazier direction instead of like all the callbacks and fan service. Like, I know that you're a big fan of Halloween 5, and I know it's cool, but it does different things. It's like a different feel. It doesn't. I like when the series, like the trilogy of Scream, the first part, I feel like every movie was extremely different. We didn't worry that much about the callbacks. And we were talking about where it originated, and I know I'm kind of going in a different subject, but I did want to talk. I think it was more prevalent in TV, the fan service, kind of like who ends up with who. This is this. We're going to do this because this is what the fans want, instead of this is what makes a better story. And I think that that's what's really wrong. What's going on in franchises today is that we're more worried about getting people to see the movie, and I know that y'all touched on that, and like having these shock moments rather than throwing the story forward. Scream 6 did this. I enjoyed Scream 6. It was fun to watch, but it was enough is enough on the callbacks to Scream 2. We're in Scream 6. Let's just push the story a little further.
I think it's a good point. I think it's really interesting. As far as I think the perfect example of the fan servicey element, especially in Scream 5, is the look behind you scene, which I thought was really funny and was just willing to go along with. But I also recognized that it was a very polarizing bit that probably could have like easily sent people watching it into either direction. I went along with it and thought it was funny, and I totally understood that it could also be incredibly cheesy and could make people cringe. Fine. To each their own. As far as the TV thing goes, I agree with you, but I also think that can be a certain symbiotic relationship with television that movies, because of the way they're made, don't exactly have the time for. Like, for instance, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I know is one of our favorite shows. Joss Whedon is a very, very, very controversial and problematic figure these days. And it's obviously a lot of the stuff that he was doing at the time would not fly today, nor should it. But I also know that he really incorporated a lot of his fans' responses into the creation of the show as it went forward. He would be checking the message boards a lot. Certain characters, like Spike, was only supposed to last 5 episodes, but fans loved him so much that he kept him around. The same thing happened with Oz. The same thing happened with Faith. So I think there's a line to be distinguished there in terms of what is pandering to fans and what is making fans feel included in the journey, if you will.
Yeah.
An example, I know that Joss Whedon made a point though you can't keep the fans happy. I know that was one of his, like, you have to torture them. But something in Buffy that I don't hate, but I could have done without, is the cookie speech and the kiss between Angel and Buffy in the series finale. It was just to make Spike jealous, and I was like, we're at the end of the world. I guess it's entertaining, and I know y'all may disagree with me, but I was like, I could have done without. But I know that was for the fans, because people love Bangle. So.
I love the cookie analogy personally. I do feel that scene, I mean, but not even for like the Buffy Angel of it all, or what is it called, Bangle? But yeah,
I always thought it was whatever.
No. Like it's just like more so speaking to the metaphor of the show and like who she is and just like how she relates to this real life that she wants. So I always loved the cookie analogy speech because it was just like, it was a very like cutesy, like Buffy way of her to kind of put a bow on like everything that, has represented the character. I did feel that like as a series finale, like that was only a 1-parter. And that whole bit with Angel kind of took up a lot of that episode. Like it was a long scene. But I hear what you're saying, just like in terms of like, you know, pandering to fans and stuff, because like a lot of the times you're not gonna please everybody. That's the thing. Every fan base is full of people who are completely divided, and they might like this, like you already mentioned, like my love for Halloween 5, which I think is an amazing, a very underrated movie that a lot of people think is a piece of garbage, and that is completely fair, and I understand why they think that way. There's a lot of issues with it, but I do love how it kind of goes for it. To a certain degree, I think that listening to the fans is not always the best thing to do, because I mean, who knows like how a creator is kind of absorbing this information. They can go on a message board and they can just like pull up one random thing and be like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And it might be a terrible idea. Like I look on Twitter and I see people with their ideas about like what would be interesting in a Scream movie. And like, I think like, that's terrible. Like, I hope that they would never do that. Like, that's just a bad idea completely. And a lot of that is kind of like fan servicey stuff like that we did see in like Scream 5 and 6, of just little callbacks here and there, and just like bringing characters back in like a very forced setting that like just doesn't feel natural to the story and things like that, just for the sake of having them. So to a certain extent, it's important to listen to the fans and sort of just see like what are they responding to, and what are they not. But you know, as a creator, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, you have to trust your instincts. Like you have to be good at what the story is that you're telling, but you have to trust your instincts. And there's just certain things that don't work, and they shouldn't be forced just because you think that a fan might respond to that. And like a really good example of this is Alien Romulus, which I think was a great movie. It was one of my favorite horror movies to come out last year. And I loved almost everything about it except for the blatant fan service.
Yeah.
There wasn't like a whole lot of it, but when it occurred, it just like it felt very jarring, because, you know, for instance, like probably the best example of this was recreating the famous line from Aliens, which is also echoed in Scream 2 of "Get away from her, you bitch," and it's very similar to what you were talking about in Scream 5 with the behind you and Mindy on the couch, with just like the way that Randy was on the couch in the original, because all it does is highlights a moment of a film where the only thing that you could think is, oh, they did this way better originally. And because of that, it just sort of decreases the quality of the product that you're currently watching, because you're just thinking of something that is better. So just calling attention to the inferior aspects of the newer material.
Oh, I agree. It makes you think of the original, which again, like you said, does it better. Like Scream 6, even though I enjoyed the ride and stuff, and I think that they listened poorly, we wanted more, or I think the idea is the fans wanted more suspense and chase scenes, but you can do that with story and chase scenes. You don't have to like recreate almost the exact kind of feeling and like just hurry up and sloppily do things. So you think of, like when I watch it, I think of Scream 2, and which is a better movie that I'd rather watch, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. In all fairness to Scream 6, I actually thought that the suspense scenes and the chase bits were the high points. So yes. I'm not mad at all for them for doing that, because frankly, I think that those set pieces were all that, quite frankly, kept it out of the gutter. So I understand that. I think it was lacking in almost every other department, but I see what you're saying.
I felt that way before though, so I can't say anything like too much about it.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. But I, no, yeah. But speaking of, as a filmmaker, I wanted to give you this opportunity to maybe talk a little bit about the project that you are wrapping up. It's a project that Garrison and I are very, very excited about, because we have been following you for a while, and we were super excited when you told us that you were taking this next step forward on your journey, and we are proud that we could be involved in helping you in any way. So I would love it if you could just take a few moments to talk about, without spoiling anything, and just as much or as little as you want to say about it. But specifically, I was hoping you could talk maybe a little bit about some of the influences and the references that you are inspired by, and how it seems that you incorporated that into your film without doing anything outright fan servicey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I should also mention, because I don't think either of you had said this yet, but you are both associate producers on the film. You both very generously contributed to its production. So just so that's on the table and everyone knows about that. So thank you. Yeah, I think that so for my co-writer, co-director Eric and myself, like we have, a very interesting and eclectic tastes in movies within the horror genre. And it's, I think like you talk about Tarantino and just like how the homage is to things that are just like not really mainstream. And I think that a lot of the movies that we really love are like would not be considered mainstream. Even though that a lot of them are, obviously Scream is somewhat more so. Scream 2 is very influential of macabre. The thing with the project that we've just kind of wrapped up and is just at the end of post-production is that is a short film. It's 17 minutes long, and it works as a prologue to what the feature would be. So we're still in the process of finishing the script for the feature. And even though there is a lot in this 17-minute short that is very evocative of things that already exist, the way that we kind of approach the material in terms of writing it is that, we think about homage and things like that, but we're very mindful of like what fan service is and what is kind of maybe too on the nose or just too familiar with something. So we don't like to outright copy anything or just like, like rip something off. Like instead what we do is we kind of try to have like a very I don't know how else to describe it other than maybe like a psychological relationship with the material that we love, and we try to understand what it is about the essence of the things or the characters or the moments or the storylines or the plot points of just all these movies that we love, and kind of shift that into our own thing and use that rather than just be like, oh, here's a reference to this and here's a reference to that. It's more about kind of taking something and finding the energy of it and making it our own. So there's a lot of like we really love Argento films. There's a lot of allusions to things that we've seen in like anything ranging from like Suspiria, Opera, Deep Red, Tenebrae. Bird with a Crystal Plumage is a major one. The film is set in an art gallery, at least like the opening for the short film, which is very evocative of the beginning of Bird with a Crystal Plumage. There's other sort of like Hitchcock is another huge influence on what we do. And as we were writing the scripts back in when we started in November of 2023, what we would do is we would put on Bernard Herrmann's score and just listen to that as we were writing, just to like kind of create like a vibe of just like, what we were trying to go for when we were writing the script. Other things, just like characters from stories that were just like, why do we really like this person? Like Amy Steele in Friday the 13th Part 2 as a final girl. We love that character, but you can't recreate that character. You can't make a Ginny Fields proxy and just like plop that into your story. You have to look at it and just like, what are the things about this character? What are like the attitudes or just like the way that she responds to things? Like that's what, you know, you try to infuse into characters in your story. So it's just like a lot of things like that. Like what is the theatricality of the movies we like, or just like the dramatics? Like those are the things that we look for in terms of, I guess, fan satisfaction. And when I say fan satisfaction, I mean like our satisfaction, because we don't necessarily know, like the things that we think are good and are infusing into our movie aren't necessarily going to be things that other people enjoy. We can only hope that they will.
Well, I agree that's it's got to feel, I would think, like I haven't made any movies or anything, that it needs to feel organic and real. Like it can't, like you said, be a copy, pick somebody out. I am super excited to see it. I knew when I was listening to your podcast, or you talk about Scream 6, how you talked about what you would have done with that movie. And I was like, oh, Zack would make a great movie, because everything that you said would have made the movies better. So, and you do have a trailer out. So, and it looks great. The movie looks great.
Oh, thank you. We haven't officially released the trailer yet, but that will be soon. You guys have seen it. But thank you. Yeah.
It looks amazing. It looks amazing.
Appreciate it.
It does. It looks amazing. Yeah. So, what do you think, Harrison? I think is that it pretty much?
I know, Zack, you have limited time, but I wanted to say, like, please, everybody, if you enjoy this kind of conversation, or if you enjoy like movies as much as we do, Zack can tell us where they can find it. He has a great podcast and a great YouTube show that I've been a fan of for years. So this is like a dream come true that he's actually on an episode of my little show. So the 20 of you that watch this, you are in for a treat.
I know. I can't believe it. This is so nice. Yeah.
Well, I'm congratulations to both of you for starting this venture, because I know for Sam, we've had conversations about you wanting to start YouTube for a while. This is actually kind of a surprise in terms of you, Garrison, because I don't think that we've ever talked about this, but I know that you have so many specific interests, so it would only make sense that you would, you know, have a platform to discuss them on. So thank you for having me on here. And yeah, you could find my my YouTube channel, Zack Cherry, ZackCherry, or also on YouTube is The Cherry Picker, which is my podcast, which is also streaming wherever you can listen to podcasts. So you can go find me there.
Awesome.
Well, thanks, everybody. Do you have any thoughts, Sam? Sorry, before I keep cutting you off.
No, that's okay. Again, Zack, I wanted to thank you so much. We really, really appreciate you doing this. It's always a pleasure. And I think I'm just going to close out with, you know, my brand new meditation that I'm going to close every episode with. And it goes, tsunami, Buddhism, Piper, no.
Very good.
God,
thank you again, Zack, and thank you, everybody, for watching.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.